Can you hear me, Marlena?
We can, Leesa. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and we'd love to hear how our library is doing in South Carolina. Can you give us an update, a little bit of information?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So first, let me do a couple of my own housekeeping, if that's okay with everybody. Can you hear me all right? Head shakes, yes. Okay, good movement this morning. I did take Marlena's direction to heart and refilled my coffee, so I'm good to go. I hope that you all are as well. Couple of quick things at the beginning. I just want to disclose I have terrible sinuses, so if I pause to get a drink of something hot, I apologize, but it's necessary for me to continue. I'm allergic to everything under the sun, so just know that as we get going. And then secondly, if you can, it would be great for me, just as somebody's speaking, if you could turn your cameras on, if it's possible for you. Otherwise, it's just sort of me looking at me or me looking at maybe one or two other people. And I don't know about you, but I'm a visual person. And so I take visual cues from other people. If I say something that I think, okay, maybe that didn't come across like I'm intending, or I want to explain that a little bit more just based on the feedback that I'm getting visually, I'd like to be able to do that versus somebody not say something or we not have enough time built in. So if you can turn your camera on, you're comfortable doing that, that would be great for me. I would appreciate it. And it's so nice to see your smiling faces also. Oh, I love it. It's getting, everybody's populating and I'm seeing my friends. It's so nice. Hi, Jonathan. Hi, Sarah. Hello, everybody. Great. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And if you can't, that's okay. But I appreciate those of you who are able to do that this morning. So thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that. And I want to just thank you, each of you, for being members of friends groups. And I'm going to do a little hand clap for you because that's the best I can do virtually. But thank you for that. Your investment of time, talent, and funding is vital to a healthy library system. I can't tell you how many times I've been to every county in South Carolina, not quite every library building, nearly. I've been at the state library for 14 years, but I can't tell you how many libraries I have visited who have said, oh yeah, our friends group did that. Oh yeah, our friends group helped us pay for that. And so our friends group are supporting us, or they're volunteering with us in this way. So what you do is so, so important to the public libraries and to the communities that you serve. And I just thank you very much for doing that. I believe that people give time and money to things that are important to them. It's my job to explain to the legislature why they want to give time and money to libraries, because we know what libraries are doing in their communities. That's my job. You all are doing this from a purely volunteer place because it's important to you. Libraries are important to me personally also, obviously, but thank you for that. I appreciate it, and I know that people in your communities appreciate it. So I only have about 20 minutes this morning to talk to you, and I could talk about libraries most of this conference. So I'm going to try really hard to stay on track. I've got a little timer over here, so I'm paying attention to that. But my comments are going to be focused in a few areas. And so I want to just break those out for you so that you know what to expect. And then we'll get going if that's okay. The first part, I'm going to talk about the state library and what we have been doing. And then I'm going to spend some time talking about public libraries and what they've been doing. I'd also like to spend just a few minutes talking about broadband challenges in our state, because broadband access is, I believe, one of the major issues facing our state today. And then I'm going to talk about what you all can do to assist your public libraries. And then at the end, Marlena has built in some time for questions. Does that sound good? I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. I have terrible chronic sinus issues, so thank you very much for understanding that. All right, so what has the state library done what have we been doing during COVID? First of all, we are still off-site primarily at the state library. We're still mostly working from home. I have some staff who are in the building every day. Those are staff people who are doing a few things. They are talking book services circulation, our circulation team. That resource is one of our most vital personal resources that we offer. We are the library for people who are blind or have visual differences or are unable to hold a book in a traditional manner. We are essentially their public library. So we stopped our circulation early on during COVID when we were trying to figure out, we collectively, everyone in the world was trying to figure out more about COVID and how long the virus lived on material and things like that, because we didn't want to potentially be passing our books to people who are in vulnerable situations and making them sick. And so we stopped that service for a few weeks. And then once some research had been done, we got information about that. We started circulating. Again, we have a quarantine of items that we receive. And so we have staff in our building doing that. And then we have some staff members in the building as well, handling various reference type activities, or right now we're doing some curbside service as well, pulling books that we are going to circulate. Otherwise, we are not, our physical location is not currently open to the public. That doesn't mean that we haven't been working. We have been working really, really hard since the beginning of COVID-19. I'm fortunate that we have a wonderful IT department. Because we do a lot of traveling at our library, we go around the state. It's not uncommon for us to make 100 visits collectively in a month to public libraries. So we were already sort of prepared for a mobile lifestyle, if you will, a mobile work style. Most of us had laptops that were actually our working computers in our office that just docked to a larger screen. If you're like me, I wear progressives and I need a larger screen. I can't live on a laptop permanently, but some younger people can. But anyway, we were prepared really to go virtual. It wasn't a big transition for us. And then fortunately, most of what we do, with the exception of training that we offer, and we're in control of that, but most of what we do happens away from our library anyway, or it happens virtually. So we've done okay adjusting. We've done pretty well adjusting to this. It's not our preference, obviously, just like it's no one else's preference. We like to be in the same building together, and we desperately miss our public libraries right now. Our consultants and others in the library are, in general, having about between 250 and 300 consultations, which could be a conversation via phone. It could be training. For me, it's a lot of contact with boards and local leaders. But so we are still consulting around 250 visits a month. So it's just happening differently. So we're still doing that, and we are still continuing our other services. Now, we did change some things during COVID, obviously, not just because we were not coming into the building physically, but we noticed very early on, and I think what I believe about libraries is libraries are flexible, nimble organizations. They should be flexible and nimble. They should be able to respond to the needs of their communities. And our library is no exception to that. And so we noticed early on when children were sent home to do virtual school that there was a significant lack of resources for children who are not learners who can just necessarily pick it up on their own and get going. And everyone was trying to figure this out, including their teachers, if you remember. So we added, this is one of the programs that we added early was tutor.com. Can you just tell me with a show of your hand or some form, do you know what tutor.com is? I see some head shakes and I say some yes. Okay, let me briefly tell you what it is. Tutor.com is a one-to-one tutoring. So if I actually will use my daughter Kaylee, who is a rising freshman. At the time she was in 8th grade, and math is a challenging subject for Kaylee. And so if you are a student and you need assistance with tutoring, now remember, our teachers at the time were moved from a classroom to a virtual situation, most without any sort of knowledge, practice, intentional plan. So it was a lot of different things in the air. If you needed assistance in your classroom as a student, you couldn't necessarily get one-to-one assistance from your teacher because they also were still trying to figure out how long this was going to last, what the rest of the school year looked like. So we purchased tutor.com on a month-to-month basis. Fortunately, I'd been in negotiations with them for about 2 years. And so this was a great opportunity for us to try them to see how many kids in South Carolina were actually going to use it. We had, in the first 45 days of having tutor.com, 1,200 individual sessions of students. That was without any real PR campaign. That was just a social media campaign and sort of a word of mouth, really, but a lot of social media. So that is significant. If you don't know, that's a big deal to have that many kids using, and they're kids. So a lot of times we have to push information a couple of times to get children interested in using things. But the tutor.com, it's a one-to-one tutoring. So Kaylee is the example I was using. Kaylee was having some challenges in math. Kaylee just signs on to tutor. She was assigned a tutor individually who specialized in math. These are all professionals. Many are professors at universities. Some are retired teachers. Some are current teachers. They're all vetted, so there's a huge process for that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Just know that they are vetted. And as a mother of children, that was really important to me because it is a one-to-one conversation with a child and an adult. So then that tutor assists the child in whatever subject they need assistance with. They don't do their homework for them. They won't give them the answer, but they work through it. I'll be honest with you and tell you I was a little skeptical, which is why we were in negotiations for 2 years. But this was a great time to try it. And so my daughter was the first guinea pig, and she got off and said, "Oh my gosh, Mom, I know how to do this." And this was something that she had been struggling with. And I was like, really? Well, that's interesting. That's good. And then the next thing came around and I said, well, hey, why don't you contact tutor.com? And so we were very impressed with them early on, and we had a lot of usage from them. So we continued that contract with Tutor throughout the summer. We knew that our usage was going to dip over the summer. But if I can just take us back, in March, we had no idea that we were going to be looking at an August school year when children did not go back to the classroom. There's no way that you could have told me March the 20th when we went home from the state library that I would not see, I feel a little emotional about it actually, because it's been a long time, that I would not see my staff again in like 2 weeks. I mean, that was my maximum thinking. This will be just a couple of weeks and we'll be fine. It's hard to imagine that it's been 7 months now. So think about that as we're talking through many of these programs. We didn't know in August that we were going to still be in this situation. Once we got to August and then September and realized this is how the school year is going to look, we decided to sign an annual contract with tutor.com. And we've been very, very pleased with it. I'll tell you where our only concern is that we might not have purchased enough sessions and working to get some additional funding if we should need it. But don't worry about that. We're going to get it taken care of. We'll still have it. But that's exciting. That's an exciting problem to have. You would rather have a service that is being utilized so much that you might need to add to it versus something you put a lot of money into and then nobody uses. So we're excited about that. We're happy to be in this place. At the same time, we added Tumble Math. Tumble Math is a program that is geared towards kindergarten through, I would say, about 5th grade. However, if a student is not proficient or on grade level with math, it could certainly assist students who are higher in grade, but not necessarily in skill set. So when I talk about products rather, and I say, well, this is primarily geared for college or middle school, just remember that's just a grade designation, but not a skill or aptitude designation. So a variety of different ages could be using the resource. So we added Tumble Math. It was very interesting to us to learn that I'm a statistics person. I probably should have been a statistician. I really like statistics. I really like numbers. I really like to know what they're telling us. I have a spreadsheet that I keep about the election, just so you know. It's my own personal spreadsheet that I make projections. So I really like statistics. That's the reason I tell you that. So the statistics told us that math is an area in South Carolina that our children struggle in. That starts, what we found, in about second grade, when math starts to kind of get real. They haven't started their times tables yet in second grade, but that's when we noticed that there were challenges. I'm nearly 50, I'll just tell you, and the new math, I don't know if any of you have children or grandchildren or nephews or nieces, and you've had to, or you've heard about the new math. It's complicated, but I say that to say we added this Tumble Math specifically because we identified in South Carolina that children are struggling with math. Of those 1,100 sessions that I told you about with tutor.com, I actually don't have that statistic directly in front of me, but I know that percentage-wise, it was around 85% of the sessions were in math. I'm just going to let that sit there for a second. That is significant. If you can't do math, you can't negotiate a wage. You can't balance your checkbook. You don't know how to decide how much money you can spend on anything. And these things have trickle down effects. We saw that during the mortgage crisis, if you remember 15 or 20 years ago now, people had been approved for more than maybe they could afford. If you don't have math skills, you don't even know to look at that as a person. So math, fundamentals of math is obviously very important. So we added tutor.com and we added Tumble Math. We also started a partnership with the Department of Education that we had been working on for a number of years. But the Department of Education at the time also was hit with, okay, Department of Education, what are you going to do? All these kids are going home and they have to be virtually schooled. I don't know how many of you know, but that's not really their role to tell schools, school districts to be in charge of all of the children in South Carolina. That is not their role traditionally in South Carolina. I don't know that a lot of people know that or understand that. So they were also in a learning curve and trying to figure out, because there was an expectation as the State Department of Education that they are and would be responsible for that. So they were also trying to figure out resources and assist teachers. And so we were able to strike up a great partnership with them, and they promoted tutor.com and Tumble Math, and we've continued that and grown that partnership. So that's been an exciting part for us, and we know that it's a valuable resource that's been used by the children in South Carolina, and there are modules for teachers as well. So teachers are using it. Are there any questions about either of those things? I've several other things I'm going to talk about, but any questions about either one of those?
We don't have any questions in the chat yet, Leesa. I did put a link to tutor.com in the chat.
Thank you.
And I'm also putting a link to Tumble Math, and I will certainly be checking that out from a parent who has spent a good amount of money on math tutoring. I was not aware that such a fantastic service is available. That is fantastic. Thank you so much for that information. So we do have a question.
Don't spend any more.
Okay.
I was just going to say, don't spend any more money on it, on your own tutoring. Just go on. I'm so excited. You have to tell me how it goes, Marlena, with your own child.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and we've got a question here. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm from Beaufort. These two programs, I don't know from our director, actually an interim director, whether we subscribe to those or not. Are those programs through you that are available to people in our area?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question, Ms. Way. I appreciate that. They are available to everybody in South Carolina. And so actually that's a good question for public libraries too. We worked with tutor.com to specifically have, for lack of a better word, sort of an icon or a portal for public libraries that they could put on their public PCs. Many are not open for that yet, but yes, they're available to everyone in South Carolina. You can go through discus.com, discus.sc.org, and access them that way. There are a variety of ways. Or you could just type in a search, tutor.com South Carolina, and it's going to take you to us and to those resources. Good question. Anything else? I realize I talked a long time about those two things, so I'm going to keep moving then. I'm sorry. Maybe we should have started, Marlena. I'm probably going to talk too much. I'm going to work on it though.
You are fine. You are fine. I blew through my introduction because I also had some coffee this morning and talked a little bit faster than I had originally intended to, as we often do when we are speaking in front of not just a crowd, but a camera. So no problem. We do have a little bit of extra time. Our next speaker is not scheduled to come on until 10:50. So feel free to share any information you would like. We do have one other question here. This is from Dolores, and she says, do the tutors help with high school students?
Yes. They help all the way. I'm trying to yes, they do. Yeah. And if it's math, calculus, trigonometry, all of that, yes. I wish I had more. There's just so much to talk about. They also help before. I've highlighted math because it's a need in South Carolina. Math is not the only subject. My daughter has dropped off an English paper to have them just sort of proof it, look at it, see if it was okay. Other kids have used them for foreign languages. They have foreign language tutors. If a child in South Carolina is in school for a subject, they cover it. Doesn't matter what it is. They cover it. Well, maybe not culinary, but basic, standard, I would say core classes. There's so many opportunities that.
I have another question.
Yes.
Is this promoted to particularly math teachers?
It's not. Those are just examples that I used. It's not promoted it's promoted to all of our teachers. We use our media specialists. We have a great relationship with our media specialists in our schools through Discus, through a relationship that we already have with Discus. And we do I don't know how many of you know, we do training in schools on our electronic resources. And so we already have relationships with the media specialists. That's our first way in. And then they promote out through their teachers. The added benefit that COVID brought was the Department of Education's interest in resources that were available to schools individually. And so the added benefit has been that they have also promoted those materials. As an aside, I'll tell you, Marlene, are you talking to me?
Yes, I apologize.
Okay.
The quote of 2020 is, "You are on mute." So yes, I was just on mute a minute ago. My apologize. That's the official quote of 2020. You're on mute. So we do have a comment in the chat here that says the Beaufort Library website has tutor.com available as a resource on that website. And then we have also got a comment here from Paul, who is saying his daughter teaches 7th grade math and wishes she was on learning a little bit more about this today. I'm sure he'll share that information. With so many math teachers out there, that direct connection, I bet, would be a challenge, but getting the information to the media specialists at all the schools is probably your most direct route to get that information there. That's a great connection.
It is, and thank you. It is, and fortunately, we do have a relationship with them already. And then, of course, our public libraries. And so what you just mentioned, was it, I'm sorry, someone in the chat, you said mentioned that Beaufort has a link. Yes,
Jennifer mentioned.
That's what I was talking about. So we worked with Tutor to make sure that each public library had something that they could directly put on their site for people who they just hear library and resources. And so they look to their home library, which a lot of people do. It's great. That's what we hope happens. So yes.
Wonderful. I don't see any more
Okay.
questions in the chat right now.
All right, I'm going to move on. I just want to make sure, though, that I haven't skewed the perspective. It is not just a math resource. It is a resource for any subject that a child is doing in South Carolina. We just know that math is an area of need in South Carolina. So that's why I highlight that. Okay, moving on. Something else that we added was Niche Academy, and your librarian friends, or you may have participated in some Niche Academy training. They're individual trainings or class trainings, and it's a variety of subjects. They're primarily library focused. So we added those for our public librarians, and they have also been, those resources have also been used very heavily during this time. And so that's an additional resource that we added. Right now we're covering things that we added during this. We are in the process of adding genealogy resources. We are in negotiations for genealogy resources. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to add some of those resources as well. What else have we been doing? So I hope that many of you know that we are the state's library for state agencies. So we have all state documents that are created by a state agency. The Department of Archives and Histories has state records. We have state documents. An example of that would be a governor's email. The Department of Archives and History, they're going to keep that. We're going to keep the governor's annual report. It's a great, hopefully, explanation of how those things split out. So we have all of the state documents created by every state agency in our collection. We believe that equity and access are the cornerstone to what we do every day. We've been working on digitizing those documents I've been at the State Library for 14 years. We've been working on a heavy digitization project for about 10 of those years. The last 2 years, we've started outsourcing some of the digitization once we checked on quality control, et cetera, because we want all of those state documents to be available to everyone in South Carolina. We don't want people to have to come to Columbia to access those resources. So we've been working heavily on a digitization project. Our staff, we have some pretty impressive scanners at the State Library, which are every bit as big as a desk or table that you are using right now. And those are for oversized books, obviously. We also have some digitization equipment that can travel. And so my staff who are in this area, have been working on digitizing specific items while at home on sort of portable scanners. It's not portable like you could really carry it with you. You want to carry it every day, but once you get it somewhere and set it up, it's pretty easy to use. And we've actually loaned some of those to public libraries as well. So we've been working heavily on our digitization project while at home. Something of interest, and I debated about whether I was going to talk about this or not, and it depended on time, but I'm going to tell you about it, and then I might cut something else later, but I think it's really important. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the battles of World War II. It's an interest of mine. My grandfather fought in World War II, and I was primarily raised by my grandparents, and so I've always been very interested in World War II. That has nothing to do with this project, other than I'm excited about this project. I hope that you will be. If you do or don't have information or knowledge about World War II, there was a battle fought in the Netherlands, and many soldiers, United States soldiers, were killed in action in the Netherlands, 8,305 soldiers to be exact. Those soldiers are buried in the Netherlands it's called the Margraten Cemetery, Margraten. Those soldiers are buried there. Several, 1,100 and some, I think 1,172, are soldiers who are unidentified. They're believed to their identity is believed to have been known. anyway, the reason this comes into libraries, we received a call from the Netherlands and said, hey, we're trying to identify or locate some resources about this South Carolina soldier who was killed in this battle. And we were wondering if you could help us. That question could have gone many ways. Our reference librarian could have said, well, we don't really do that. You might want to call the archives because they have personal records like marriage, birth, death, military service, etc. Fortunately, our reference librarian said, tell me a little bit more about what you're trying to do. If you're not familiar with this project or this battle or this area, the Netherlands has a cemetery dedicated to United States soldiers, and they care for those soldiers individually as families. Families adopt a United States soldier in the Netherlands, and then they care for their grave as though it was their own loved one. They have specific days set through the year where they celebrate, acknowledge that person's commitment in their life. This battle happened, World War II ended 75 years ago. So interesting that if you looked online at the pictures of this gravesite, they look as though the crosses have just been placed there within the month. It's incredible the care that they take. So they contacted us because they were trying to secure pictures of these fallen soldiers. There were 32 in South Carolina. They wanted to know these soldiers' stories and secure pictures of them so that the families who adopted them would know a little bit more about them. So we've been working with the Netherlands. We received some international attention for this because we have helped them identify South Carolina soldiers and pictures so that they could know a little bit more about the people they adopted. It's been a fascinating project. We had to sort of cold call families and say, is this person related to you? Do you happen to have a picture? Could you tell us a little bit about and explain the project? I bring this up because it's just incredible. One of the families that we contacted did not know where their loved one was. They were listed as missing in action. They did not know that their loved one was buried and their gravesite was being taken care of individually by another family. So it not only brought closure to that family and peace to that family, but it's a fascinating, I think, and meaningful project. It's an example of something maybe out of the box that we do. Again, I think libraries flexible and nimble, and we had the resources, so we've assisted them. We're turning that into a national project where I'm partnering with other state library leaders to identify their members of military who are also buried in the Netherlands. So look for information about that. If you're not signed up for our newsletter, if you haven't looked at our website, please do. Lots of really interesting things happening at the library. Any questions about that I can answer quickly? If not, I'm happy to talk to you offline.
You're fine, Lisa. We do have a few minutes, so no rushing at all. We do have a question here from Terry. Terry is asking, is anyone digitizing newspapers? And it says microfilm. So I'm imagining he's talking about what was originally, newspapers that were changed to microfilm, and is that able to be digitized?
So that's a great question. I really will try to be mindful of times. I want to talk about public libraries too. That's a great question. We don't digitize newspapers. They are largely already digitized. We have the entire state paper back to the 1800s on, we had it on microfilm. It's now digitized. We also have a membership that we're negotiating to newspapers.com that we hope to be able to make available. We have News Bank, which is already a part of Discus, and there are over, there are a couple hundred different newspapers that are available, historical newspapers and current newspapers. Actually, that's really important to the legislature because they would have to be members of every newspaper. They hit a paywall very early in the week is what they tell me. And their staff tell me they have a couple of stories. I think it's 2 stories is the limit per paper every week. So that's a big resource that we provide to the legislature and their staff. They love that. That's exciting for us because state employees and the legislature are a group that who we specifically serve. So I hope that answers your question about the newspapers. We don't digitize newspaper. newspapers, those have largely already been done. Just a kind of an aside, we also added a historically Black newspaper collection within the last 18 months to 2 years. Time is relative right now. I don't know if you know this, but if you were in the South and you were a person of color and you had an event that would normally be published in the paper, it was not published in the paper here. It was instead sent north, and it was published in a historically Black newspaper. So we have access and availability to those resources as well. So, for example, if you were a person of color and you were doing genealogy research, and you were looking for an obituary of your loved one, you would most likely not find that in the state paper. You would have to look in papers that were published in the North. So we have access to that as well.
Okay, I think that answers all the questions that we currently have in the chat. Thank you.
Great. So thank you very much. So I'll move on then. What else have we been doing? So we added training. We took all of our in-person training online. We do that through webinars and variety of topics of training. We also have virtual training that people can participate on. They don't have to be in a class. They could just say, I'm interested in this topic, and then sign on to take a class in that. So some of those classes have been, I'll just give you a couple of examples: developing virtual sensory programs, writing effective emails, engaging leaders for change, strategizing social media, creating programming. Basically, that gives you an example of the breadth of the classes that are available. During the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, when libraries had closed and weren't really offering any sort of curbside service, et cetera, I encouraged training, and I know that a lot of public library directors did training for their staff and encouraged their staff to do training. The first 30 days that we did, that we were at home and we were really doing training, we had 900 different participants in training. That's exciting, I think. I sort of like to find the silver lining in things. And so COVID, there's not many, but initially at least there was some time where people could spend time on self-development. And so we saw a big use, and we've continued to see usage for training in public libraries. I'm going to keep going. And if you have questions, put them in the chat. Marlena will let me know. I'm not great about watching the chat, Marlena. I focus mostly on what I'm doing. So if you stop me, it's perfectly fine.
You are good to go. We've got you covered.
Great, thank you. Okay, accessibility is another area of importance and focus for us. And so we offer accessibility training for libraries. We have an accessibility toolkit that libraries can use. And we've continued to do that. We were in the middle of doing accessibility audits of actual physical locations, but we had to stop that, obviously. So we'll start that back up, but we've continued moving in that way. We want the library to be available and accessible to everybody in the community. And part of our goal is to help public libraries address those issues. We received CARES Act funding. We received $465,000 of CARES Act funding directly. We're the only state agency who received direct CARES Act funding from the federal government. That came from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and we received $465,000. We used that money partially to pay for PPE and other items that public libraries would need. Many used it on plexiglass barriers in their libraries. So if you see that could have been funded by us in your home libraries. And then we also have used some of those funds for Homework Help Center hotspots, and that is a program that your public libraries opted into. They are devices that they loan to children in the community. There's a lot of data that we can get from those resources. They are CIPA compliant, which is the Child Internet Protection Act. So you couldn't have one of our devices and go look at something inappropriate. They're all educational resources that are available. That's another area that we spent some of that money on. And then we have a little bit left that we are waiting to see if we're going to use that for small business resources for libraries or workforce development for libraries, where fortunately our funding does not have to be spent by the end of the year. So we've got about $100,000 set aside for something else. And it could be one of those two things, or it might be something else that public libraries need. We didn't keep any of that funding for ourselves. It all was pushed out in some way to our public libraries or the communities. We didn't keep a administrative amount or anything like that. So all of that money is going out directly. Also, part of those, part of the homework help center hotspots, some of the funding was used for, I'll just use very basic terms, sort of Wi-Fi devices for bookmobiles to make them, or outreach vehicles to make them more accessible. A lot of our bookmobiles, especially the newer ones, already have Wi-Fi on board, but not everybody has a new bookmobile. Not everybody has a new outreach vehicle. And so some of those funds were used to put Wi-Fi on a bookmobile or outreach vehicle. I'm about to wrap up the state libraries portion, and I'm moving into public libraries. Any questions?
We do not have any questions, but we do have a comment. Terry, who was asking earlier about digitizing newspapers, gotta get that out quickly. He has commented that there's nearly 69 newspapers have been published in York County alone. Some of them were Black newspapers. That's a lot.
Well, does he
York County.
Does he say what year? Oh, I could look in the comments. But, okay. And so that could matter. That could matter also. These are historically significant. So it could be the years, but I would love to have, you said Terry? Okay. I'd love to get Terry's information because what?
Terry with a T.
Yes. Okay. Maybe Terry, you can send me a message privately so you could give me your contact information and let's talk after, or set up a time, because we want to make sure that we have everything in our collection for the people in South Carolina to be able to use. So if we don't have it, we want to add it. So maybe if you'll send me your information, I would love to talk to you about it. I'm going to move on to public libraries because I want to make sure that I talk about public libraries, because public libraries are my heart, and they're so important to our communities. You already know that. They are cornerstone to our communities. That's where everybody has equal access. Everybody, the libraries for everyone, has equal access to information in the public library. In South Carolina, some quick statistics. I already disclosed that I'm a numbers person. There are 195 locations on our last statistical report. Let me clarify that. We could have added a couple since then, but on our last report, 195 locations, 33 bookmobiles. Public libraries have a $135 million budget collectively. There are 4.85 million people in South Carolina. Last year, public libraries had 14 million visits. I love that number. I love that number so much. More than 3 times the number of people in our state visited their public library. I recently helped a public library whose funding was going to be cut, and they contacted me and said, "Hey, Leesa, it looks like I'm going to be cut. All the other departments of the county are also going to be cut." It was a significant cut. It's a county that could not take a cut at all. They just could not absorb that. And that director said, "Do you have any ideas for what I can do?" And I wrote a letter to their county administrator and finance director, who was actually sort of driving this, not a heavy library user, and some other pieces involved in there. And I quoted the number of population for their county and the number of library visits specifically for that county. It was almost 4 times the number of population, and suggested that they compare that to the other county departments and the impact that they have just from a pure number standpoint on people's lives in their community. So I'm happy to report the library was not cut at all. The other departments were. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I say libraries, nobody else, thank you, nobody else serves their communities like libraries. So 14 million visits last year. Very exciting. Here's another great number, 23 million items circulated in South Carolina. Amazing. 3.2 million internet sessions happened at the library. It's astounding to me, the work that our public libraries do in their communities and the impact that they have. It's just absolutely astounding. What have libraries been doing? They are still serving, what have public libraries been doing? They are still serving their community. That has changed over the course of COVID, which is what I was asked to focus my comments on. Initially, like everyone else in the world and in the United States, they're trying to figure out how long this was going to last, what they were going to do for their staff, what they were going to do for their communities, how could they best be of service. So over time, this has changed. I'm going to tell you where we are today and a couple of highlights of the summer. I was particularly worried about summer reading. The summer reading slide is a real issue with children. If children don't read over the summer, they slide backwards to where they were 4 to 6 months before the school year ended. So that's half of where they were developmentally is just lost if they're not reading over the summer. Summer reading programs are vital to the education and intellectual ability of the children of our state. So I was really concerned about summer reading. We on typical have about 145,000 children participate in summer reading. I was hoping that the pandemic would be over and that this would be our magic time, right? This is, all right, it'll be fine by summer reading. It's gonna be fine. By summer reading, we'll be fine. And then as we got closer to summer reading, it was obvious that probably not. So I just want to highlight what public libraries did for summer reading because it's just simply amazing to me. Many created kits that could be taken home by the children in their communities. Those kits had activities that they could work on. There were books in there, just a variety of resources for families in the kits. They also moved some resources online. So there were a lot of different story times through social media. Facebook, it was a heavily used platform, I know, for story times. Some also, I don't know how many of you participated or seen this at your library, but oftentimes summer reading programs have some sort of entertainer come and maybe do an activity, a creative activity. So it was interesting to me, some moved that online and their participation was actually really good, which is exciting because you think it's a performer and a lot of times the kids are interacting with a performer who's in person. I wasn't sure how that was going to go. It went fine. So it's amazing and impressive to me. So summer reading, we're still gathering those statistics on summer reading. I think we have a couple of libraries that we're waiting on, and then we'll have that information. Marlene, if this group is interested, I'm happy to send you that number if you have a way that you can send it out to everybody, or just read our newsletter and it'll show up in there too. But I'm happy if you're specifically interested in that number and you're like, I wonder where we ended up. Leesa was talking about that. Happy to send that out.
Fantastic. And we also have a comment in the chat. All of those fantastic statistics that you just provided, the 4.85 million citizens in South Carolina, and 3 times the number of library visits than the number of people in the state. All of those statistics that you provided, would you be willing to put those in the chat while the next speaker is
Sure. Yes. Yeah, I'm happy to.
That'd be fantastic.
And I'm happy to. What I'll also do is I will put a link in there to that statistical report. Those are just highlights that I chose. But our statistical report has statistics specifically for every county, and it's a sheet that oh gosh, I don't even know how many columns are on the sheet. 60. Wow. So 60 different pieces of information about your specific county, and then collectively about South Carolina. there's a lot of information available. So I'll put that link too. Those are, I just highlighted ones that I thought spoke to the larger piece. Yes, I'll put those in the chat. I said I'm a statistics person. I love statistics and math. Math is great because math is always going to come back to something logical. But you can't just use statistics. Statistics just begin the story, and then you make it personal, which I'm going to maybe talk a little bit about. I'm nearing the end, Marlene, I promise. But the statistics just begin the story. If you're for the legislature, for example, or somebody in your local political group, statistics, that's your hook to say, hey, hang on a second, let me tell you why libraries are important. Like the county I mentioned, you only have this many people who live in your community. This many people visit the library. Look at that, happens to be 3.5 times the amount. And then you start to tell the personal stories about why it's important to people individually. But that is your sort of, I have found with people in public service, specifically people who are making decisions about money, that statistical part is your, hang on just a second, please pay attention to me. I'm not just the library lady. I have real impact in your community. So hopefully that's helpful to some of you too, as you're having maybe conversations locally. Okay, what else did public libraries do? Many have started curbside service, and so their patrons will reserve their materials online, or they can call and reserve materials, and then they drive through and pick them up from the curb. Our librarians are frontline first responders. They are working right there in their communities. And some have also resumed at this point limited service. So some are allowing patrons back in their libraries, and they may be limited to the number of hours that or time period that they're able to be in the library. They may also be limited by the number of visitors that they can have at any time. That really is library specific. And so any questions about that I can answer related to those two things, curbside or limited?
We don't have any questions as of yet.
Okay, that's information. I will tell you, that's information that the governor's office recently requested from me as well, because they know how important libraries are, and they know that economically people who are filing for unemployment, people who are filing for are trying to find new jobs, they know that they use their libraries, internet, and resources to do that. And so the governor's office was interested to know what libraries, what their hours are and what their services are currently, because they know how important libraries are. Paul said curbside here, popular with patrons and staff. I agree. Okay, the last thing I'm going to highlight is just a very quick program. You may have seen this in your library. If you haven't, you might be interested in it. We partnered with the South Carolina Parks and Rec and secured state park passes. We sent those park passes to libraries who wanted them. They can loan those out to patrons. It's called a backpack project. Excuse me. And inside of the backpack are resources about being outside, essentially. There's a binoculars kit. There's information about birds you might see in South Carolina, trees you might see. We've got resources from a variety of our state agency partners, created a backpack. That backpack includes a pass to get into state parks. So we know that people are tired of being at home, but it's not safe for us to all be together yet. But it is okay to be outside, and it's helpful just from a stress level place for us to get outside and spend some time. We're fortunate, I think, to live in South Carolina where we have a lot of days of sunshine or a lot of tolerable weather, especially right now. We're out of the heat. So that's a project that we started and our public libraries are using. We're excited about that. We are excited to negotiate with the Parks and Rec to get some more passes and to continue this program through next year. If you haven't heard of that yet, there's some information.
We've
The
got
South Carolina Parks theme is get outside. I agree. Yes.
We've got Jimmy Wooten shared some information from he's with the Greenville County Library System, and he shared some information specifically on Greenville's partnership with the State Park Passport Program. And then I have also shared the Charleston Library System's press release about that program. So information in the chat about that, which is a fantastic program.
So I hope that my comments today have given you a little bit of a highlight of what we've been doing at the State Library. There's so much. I honestly could talk about this just for much longer than probably most of you would want to sit and talk to me about it. But that's what we've been doing at the State Library. Public libraries are doing what they always do, which is being responsive to their communities. Public libraries, I drove by the DHEC building on my way into my office yesterday, and they have a big sign out front that says, "Heroes work here." And I just thought, gosh, if I could get a sign made for every library in South Carolina that says that, like, wouldn't that be good? That's true. Like, heroes work there every day. They are changing people's lives every day. So if you want some more information about what's happening in libraries, let me know. My last couple of quick comments are about broadband. If you haven't followed the broadband issue in South Carolina, please pay attention for this is a huge issue in our state. It's a huge issue when I go before the legislature and ask for money, because I have had more than one, just two legislators hold up their phone and say, "Why do we need libraries? Everybody has one of these." Everybody doesn't have one of these, and that's not what libraries do. So broadband is a significant challenge in our state. We've known this. We've been working on increasing Wi-Fi and internet capability in our public libraries for 3 years. Me and my tiny little staff, which really is one person in IT, our IT director, Paul Harmon, who is just a gift to libraries and to my library also, has gone around to the various libraries in South Carolina. We had some of our public libraries operating at, and I'm going to try to make this really uncomplicated, but 10 megabytes per second. What that means is that's a dial-up speed. Dial-up. We just got our last library out of that situation in actually in March. We were going home, and Paul was finishing. We were going home to work, and Paul was finishing some work in other libraries, and I had put a nobody can travel, and the state had sort of ban on my staff just for safety. And Paul said, "Lisa, I've got to go to this library. Can I please go to this library? I'm almost got them complete." And he did, and we got them complete. So I'm excited to tell you that all of the libraries in South Carolina are currently at 100 megabytes per second upload speed. That's significant if you've been at 10. And it's amazing that they were able to function and deliver the services that they were at 10 megabytes per second. So what does that mean to broadband in South Carolina? Every public library in South Carolina has the capability to access the internet, high-speed internet. In many communities, maybe not your community, but in many communities in South Carolina, the library has the fastest speed in their entire community, faster than the county offices, faster than any other office in their community. We know that people are using their public libraries to look for jobs and apply for unemployment. Kids are using the Wi-Fi to do homework. Equity and access is an important issue that we're all talking about right now. If you are interested in equity, if you are interested in having equal access to information, you have to be interested in broadband, because there are some communities in our state, to just make this really simple, where they don't even have the infrastructure available for high-speed internet. It does not exist there. And fortunately, our legislature, our state received CARES money as well. We received $30 million, and the governor has put the bulk of that money into addressing broadband issue. and that has been used to expand and create broadband infrastructure that just doesn't exist. So it doesn't matter if somebody could, if they have the funding to pay for high-speed internet in the area, if the infrastructure, so the poles, the wires, the fiber doesn't exist, it doesn't matter. It's like having a battery for a car and no car. You have to have the infrastructure to get the internet to an area. So that's, if you haven't followed broadband, I would suggest that you look into that a little bit. $30 million of that money is being used to expand the broadband. Some was used for Wi-Fi hotspots for kids also. Those projects have to be completed by December the 30th. There's an estimate that we need $600 million in South Carolina to really impact the broadband infrastructure. I give you that information, albeit quickly, to say South Carolina is going to be putting money into broadband. That's going to have an impact on libraries. It's going to have an impact on communities. Get involved if you aren't in that broadband discussion so that you can understand it fully. I just encourage you, it can get really complicated. I encourage you, if you don't understand something, to just say, I don't know what you're talking about. Could you give me a different example of how to understand this? Because it can get complicated and you can sort of go, well, this must be above my knowledge level. No, people can sort of break that down so that we all understand it. We have to understand it. I think that it is the biggest issue facing South Carolina. So much is online now that you can't really receive a proper education without having access to the internet. It's just the way that the schools are structured now. So if you don't have internet at home and your assignments, let's just forget that we're in this virtual situation. Let's just pretend like everything is normal. If you don't have internet access at home, many kids can't do their homework because their assignments are online from their teachers. They're not getting books out anymore. Like, that's just the reality, whether you agree with it or not. It is the reality that the children in South Carolina are dealing with. And so if they don't have internet access in their home, which many don't, they're already behind. And so we have to do something about the broadband infrastructure in South Carolina. Proud to say that our libraries are up to speed. Our libraries are cornerstones. We already know that in their communities, but even specifically in this very important issue of broadband. Okay, Marlena, I'm just wrapping up. I promise. I see the time. Thank you. Friends groups. So a couple of other quick statistics. There are 30 public libraries have friends groups in South Carolina. However, there are 86 Friends of Library groups. So some of those library systems have more than one friend group. This is an interesting number, I think. There are over 10,000 members of friends groups, 10,856 to be exact to the last reporting. I don't know if you all knew that you were that strong in numbers, but you are, so yay. How will public libraries need assistance from FOSCL moving forward? So there's a possibility, and I briefly hinted to this, that libraries will lose funding due to a reduction in the revenue in their county specifically. What can you do? Advocate, advocate, advocate. Know your library services. Be able to speak about those individually with people. I opened this by saying people give time and money to what's important to them. The library is for everyone. Our challenge and commitment is to make sure that people know why the library is important to them individually. Advocate, advocate, advocate. Check in with your libraries. It's a really stressful time. See if there's anything that you can do. See if there's any support that they need. Reduce any restrictions or barriers that you may have on funding. If you have any sort of barriers, really look at those and see if there's a way that you can help libraries, and just share resources together. I don't specifically know what the networking is in FOSCL, but you all are a resource in and of yourself, and you have interesting individual things in your libraries. I think some sort of discussion, if you're not doing this already, maybe a listserv, et cetera, if you can share the resources, share information about what you're doing, I think that's helpful because we can all learn from each other. That's my closing. Does anybody have any questions, Marlena? I'm so sorry that I took so long. I really did try to stay.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We do have a comment here. The State Library This is from Leslie. The state library training opportunities and professional development collection are crucial in helping library staff expand their knowledge. Thank you for keeping us moving forward. So that's a thank you from Leslie. And we really do appreciate you coming on today and giving us this update. FOSCL continues to learn and grow and adapt. I loved your comment about taking the time for self-development. Friends of South Carolina Libraries has taken some of the downtime during the COVID-19 struggles to figure out how we can be more virtual. And like you were saying about a silver lining, it has been a silver lining for us because we're able to reach more people across the state very quickly and easily. Not everybody has to get in the car and drive 2 hours to come into the state library and have a face-to-face meeting. We can all do it from our dining rooms, and it's been very productive. So thank you, Leesa. We really look forward to you putting that information on the link to the statistics in the chat. Thank you for taking your time out of your very busy schedule to speak to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate being here, and I hope that I shared some helpful information. I'm sure that my contact information is around. I'll put that in the chat as well. I love to hear from people. So if you have something, it doesn't have to just be, you guys are doing great. It can be, you need to work on this. We love that too, because we want to be the best that we can. So thanks so much for having me. I am going to be around for the day as well. Thank you, guys.
Leesa, we really appreciate it. Thank you. And that's exactly right, everybody. As this day moves on, if there are things that you think we can work on, go ahead and let us know, because that's how we're going to improve and we're going to provide better services. So thank you, Leesa. We really do appreciate that. We've got Jonathan Newton up next, and he is going to speak about advocacy on behalf of the South Carolina Library Association. Jonathan is the Access Coordinator at the University of South Carolina Upstate Library. So Jonathan, if you will go ahead, and I think you have screen share capabilities. If you'll go ahead and share your screen and pull up your PowerPoint.
All right.
Wonderful.
Everybody hear me okay? Perfect. Thank you so much for having me here. I want to echo a little bit of what Leesa said. I love speaking to friends groups, especially about advocacy, because it's very much like preaching to the choir. Most people use the library for free. Y'all are actually paying, which is amazing. So yes, my name is Jonathan Newton, and I'm the ALA counselor for the South Carolina Library Association, which means I am South Carolina's representative to the American Library Association. And along with Virginia Canoni, we co-chair the advocacy committee. Virginia couldn't be here today, but I asked her if there's anything that she that she wanted to include in the presentation. She said, make sure that you start with a cute picture. So I don't have any cute pictures. So this is a picture of Virginia's baby playing with a watermelon in a sink. Anyways, so we are in uncertain times right now, and advocacy can be difficult. We have things that we're worried about. We're worried about our health. We're worried about jobs. We're worried about our loved ones. We worry about social issues. Whenever we meet to talk about stuff that we've done in 2020 for advocacy issues, it's always, we wanted to, we should have, we could have. I'm kind of, at this point, I'm done beating myself up over circumstances outside my control. And I think we all should feel the same way. So we're very much looking to the future. Leesa, her point about statistics was fantastic, and is actually a perfect segue. Statistics being a hook for telling your personal story. The personal story collection is sort of what we've been working on for the past few years. 2017, we started a postcard campaign. I don't know if y'all know, but for every year, the past 4 years, the presidential budget has cut out all federal funding to libraries, and it's been up to folks like Leesa and other advocates to work to get it put back in, which it thankfully has been, safe more or less for the past few years. But we started off in 2017 with the Save South Carolina Libraries postcard campaign, which some of y'all probably participated in. That was targeted specifically to Lindsey Graham as the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. In 2018, we sort of broadened the scope to this I Love My Library, because we sort of wanted to give more space for people to, draw cute pictures and have something that's a little bit more evergreen that we could reuse over and over again, because it's important to keep this going. In 2019, we started the Show and Tell Your Legislator, which I hope some of y'all are familiar with. It is, co-sponsored by FOSCL, and it's a way to upload your stories online and create these digital books that we hope to turn to print books. The idea was that these would be presented to our legislators at National Library Legislative Day, which happens every May. So it would have been May 8th through the 9th this year. Here's an example of how what one of the books looks like right now. These are stories that people sent in from their individual libraries and some of the photos they sent. And it looks really great. It's good to have these tangible things for people to be able to look at and refer to and hold on to complement the statistics that we send them. But we couldn't quite get these things to our legislators in 2020 like we hoped to. This slide is from, somebody made this slide several years ago predicting that 2020 would be the best year ever. It wasn't. So there were a number of things that happened. Number one, National Library Legislative Day was canceled in person due to COVID. They went virtual, which was great. It was kind of a week-long event, sort of, it helped people sort of learn how to interact with, it was kind of like a advocacy boot camp sort of thing. I imagine that it'll be the same thing next year. But, you can't blame everything on a calendar either. Yeah, 2020 has been bad, but there are, it has highlighted some things that have always existed that needed to be highlighted. Leesa touched on this a lot before, but there is a big disparity in South Carolina between, the broadband issue that came, that was just demonstrated with perfect clarity this year. There's racial inequity that has always been there that came into hyper focus this year. So, a lot of the issues we're dealing with have always been there. So let's see. I was going to talk about the election, but who knows right now. The only thing I will say is that presidential election years, advocacy is always a little tough because our legislators are preoccupied with re-election. It's difficult for legislation to get passed through during election years. So
that is,
it's always tough. And this year in particular. So yeah, we had a pandemic. So advocacy was difficult probably when we needed it the most. Like I said before, our reasons for, being concerned for our health, being concerned for our jobs, because, various budget cuts, we all had personal things going on that, that take your time. And like, Marlena said at the very beginning, a lot of us, we're volunteer organizations, and volunteering isn't easy right now because we're all stretched really thin, which, you know, I'm super impressed and super proud of our friends for even putting this thing together. It's amazing. Let's see. So because of this, we're keeping the Show and Tell Your Legislator going on through 2021. One of the reasons being the obvious ones that we couldn't deliver it in time. We couldn't deliver it earlier this year because the pandemic started, but also in the last 6 months, our stories have changed significantly. The things that we wanted to tell people about in January of this year are not the same things that we need to be telling our legislators about now. We have, you know, been resilient in the face of, you know, having to make budget cuts, reinventing our services, you know, Leesa said curbside, you know, virtual programming that I think Jimmy's going to talk about later on. Here at USC Upstate, we've had to change our course reserve system where we used to have short-term books that would check out for 2 or 3 hours for people that might not be able to afford the textbook. And because of quarantine procedures, we can't, it's not feasible because we have to quarantine stuff for at least 72 hours. So we've been working on digitizing and, you know, going through copyright boot camps and basically trying to do everything we can to scan and make stuff available. So things have changed in terms of what we do. Libraries' needs have changed. You know, we didn't need, or at least we didn't think we needed last year, you know, PPE. We always knew that the broadband issue was something that was important, but it's just not to keep harping on this, but it's worth harping on. It is more important. I mean, it is vitally important now, you know, more than ever. And so that's always been an issue that we've advocated for, but it is slowly becoming the most important thing that we need to be advocating for.
Jonathan, I've gone ahead and put a link to the link that you have on the screen right now. I have included that link in the chat so people can click on that and get directly to that page.
Great.
And we have a couple comments in here about, yes, lawmakers like to blame election years for a lot of different things.
Yes.
Something that a lot of, and then a little quick question, wondering about the symbolism between elections and the seagull photo. Seagulls, is that a, we're not getting the joke?
I'm not sure because Virginia made that slide.
Question for Virginia, we'll certainly ask her.
I think much like the pandemic picture, I think she's wanted something
pretty, right?
Something pleasing to go, you know, a spoonful of sugar.
Right, that's exactly. Wonderful. Well, those are the only questions and comments we have so far.
I will check and see if there is any secret symbolism, though. That's a very good question. Let's see. So this is basically once, you know, we'll continue to collect people's stories. If a library has submitted a story, feel free to resubmit. Don't think just because you turned something in already, you can't turn something back in because, you know, dealing with COVID has changed everything. So we still may be able to deliver these show and tell projects in person. I mean, we hope to do that at some point. Deliver over virtual meetings. One of the things that we would like to do very much is have a virtual town hall with our legislators once the election stuff has settled down. We would like to get South Carolina, you know, our federal legislators in a, you know, in a meeting for us to talk with about issues. And this is something Leesa and I have talked about a little bit, coordinating some together, and SCASL, the School Library Association, is working on this with us also. Let's see, next steps. Let's see, yes, we're looking to see what Legislative Day 2021 is going to be like. It's probably going to be virtual, but the good news this time is that we'll be planning for a virtual event ahead of time. It won't be, a last minute change. Virtual office visits, succession planning, that's kind of for the advocacy committee in general. Virginia and I are going to be rotating off at some point, and we're looking for, volunteers to help and participate. It's open to everybody, not just librarians. Which leads me to my final point. You guys are our best advocates, really. Y'all make better advocates than we do for the same reasons that Leesa mentioned at the very beginning of her presentation. She's paid to advocate for libraries. A lot of us, I volunteer my time, but I work for a library. You guys are just the perfect supporters for us. I would love to have more participation from y'all. And that's not saying anything against y'all, that's an outreach thing on my part. I would love to help coordinate some stuff like these legislative day visits with you guys, and bring more of you who are just, such fantastic library supporters with us. Hopefully someday when we can go back to Washington again in person, but also virtually to these meetings that we hopefully will have towards the end of the year or early next year.
Partnerships between the South Carolina Library Association, SCASL, the South Carolina Association of School Librarians, the Friends of South Carolina Libraries, and the South Carolina State Library. All of these partnerships and these connecting aspects are so important for moving libraries forward. We need to come at it from all different angles. So it's very encouraging to have all of this collaboration.
Exactly. Okay, so I flew through that. Thank you all very much. There's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me. And if there are any questions immediately.
We don't have any questions in the chat right now, but I would encourage everybody on here, if you have not participated in the Show and Tell Your Legislator, please do so. My friends group has, but Jonathan brings up a very good point. What we focused on was a makerspace cart, which you can't really touch anything right now. So, spotlighting some of the ways libraries have adapted to the COVID-19 situation would be a great addition to those books that they're going to be putting together to show the legislators exactly what is happening in the libraries. So if you have not participated in that program, reach out to Jonathan or Virginia if you have any questions on how to do so.
See.
Wonderful. Jonathan, thank you so much for taking some time to be here with us today to talk about advocacy and ways that library friends can advocate for their specific library. We have run a few minutes over, and that is okay because the information that we have, we do have one quick question here. Is there a deadline, Jonathan, for submitting?
Excellent question. Okay. I think we've,
if you don't have it right now, perhaps you could send it to us and we could put it into the chat later.
Yeah, I believe it's being extended until through May 2021, but I'll double check and let y'all know.
Wonderful. And then we did have a question asking if can anyone join the South Carolina Library Association?
Absolutely.
Line jumped right in there. So thank you, Faith, for answering that question. She jumped right in there and she put a link to to join online.
Yes, I meant to actually say that at the end to encourage y'all to join the SCLA. We'd love to have you. Thanks for asking the question, and thank you, Faith, for answering.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. We really appreciate it. So we have run a few minutes over, but again, that is fine because this information has been very useful. Although if we don't get up and stretch and move around a little bit, we're going to be exhausted by the end of the day. So we are going to still have a short break So we're going to go ahead and just pause for a minute. We will stop the recording and have a quick break, and we will come back in about 5 minutes with Miss Debbie Cahoon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jonathan.